Charles III was formally proclaimed Britain's new king by the Accession Council in a history-laden ceremony following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. The ceremony, televised for the first time, is a centuries-old formality to recognise the new king's sovereignty, even though he automatically became monarch after the Queen's passing on Thursday. But after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest-serving monarch of the United Kingdom, on the 8th of September, the reign was passed on to her eldest son Charles, the former Prince of Wales, and while he awaits his coronation, he will henceforth be addressed as King Charles III and will be conferred with all the powers the late Queen held as head of state in the British constitutional monarchy.
The new monarch of England, King Charles III, being escorted by the Accession Council to the throne room at the St. James Palace for oath-taking.
I, Charles III, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Charles promising to follow the advice of the Privy Council while executing his duties as the head of state.
Do faithfully promise and swear that I shall inviolably maintain and preserve the settlement of the true Protestant religion as established by the laws made in Scotland. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and to seek the peace, harmony and prosperity of the peoples of these islands and of the Commonwealth realms and territories throughout the world.
Among the witnesses to the accession to the throne, his son, now Prince of Wales William, and Queen Consort Camilla. The new king then approved a series of proclamations, including the day of the funeral of the Queen being declared a bank holiday by Penny Mordaunt, the Master of Ceremonies.
Appointing the day of Her late Majesty's state funeral as a bank holiday in England, Wales and Northern Ireland.
This was the second part of the elaborate ceremony, which started at 10 a.m. British Standard Time on Saturday in the picture gallery with the announcement of the death of the Queen.
My Lords, it is my sad duty to inform you that Her Most Gracious Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, has passed away on Thursday,
followed by the proclamation that Charles is the new king, approved by the Accession Council on the stage. The Privy Council, comprising 200 members, including MPs, former Prime Ministers and members of the clergy, present in the room listening to the announcement. Present at the event were current Prime Minister Liz Truss and former Prime Ministers including Boris Johnson, Theresa May, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair and David Cameron.
To bless His Majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. God save the King!
God save the King!
As the historic event taking place after 70 years was televised for the first time, the traditional reading of the proclamation from the balcony was also carried out. The Garter King of Arms reading the first and principal proclamation from the balcony above Frary Court.
3 cheers for His Majesty the King! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
The flags at half-mast were raised briefly as the new king took over, but moved back to the position of state mourning till the funeral of the Queen. With this, the transition has been announced and sealed. The end of an era, the start of a new one. Bureau Report, NDTV.
And for the first time in its long history, Britain acquired a new Prime Minister and a new monarch in the same week, with the 96-year-old Queen's death on Thursday. And Prime Minister Modi today spoke with his UK counterpart and congratulated her on taking charge as Britain's Prime Minister. They also discussed bilateral issues. A statement from 10 Downing Street says that the two leaders acknowledged the grief felt by many people of the UK and of India and paid tribute to Her Majesty the Queen's lifetime of service. India will be observing a state mourning on Sunday as a mark of respect to the Queen. The statement issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs says that on this day of mourning, that is tomorrow, the national flag will be flown at half-mast throughout India on all buildings. There will be no official entertainment on that day. So, the seamless and symbolic transfer from one reign to the other, with a mix, as you saw there, of ritual yet constitutional practicality. It really was the choreography of continuity. So here is a new king promising to follow in the Queen's footsteps, to follow in the Queen's example. Is that going to be easy? Joining us for more on this, Andrew Whitehead, well-known British journalist, and Farrukh Dhondy, well-known writer. Thank you both for your time. Andrew Whitehead, to you first. Charles III formally confirmed as king in a ceremony that was televised for the first time. The first time this historic ceremony was televised. What was behind that thought, that decision? Would you know, was this a calculated move, or is it just, it's a modern monarchy, these are the times, everything is televised? I mean, obviously we haven't had a ceremony like this in 70 years, or was there more to it, that we have a king here that needs to be seen as approachable, that the people need to be involved in this handover, this transition right now?
Well, I think the attempt was to demonstrate that the new king is going to be a modern monarch. I'm not quite sure it came across like that, because after all, the Queen's coronation back in 1953 was itself televised. I remember my parents telling me they bought their first television to be able to see the coronation being broadcast. So it's not really a big step into modernity. And I think many people, seeing the ceremonial that your viewers have just seen, the trumpets blaring, the uniforms, the very hidebound nature of the Accession Council, will be, as I am, just a touch bewildered. And the Accession Council, well, I thought I was fairly well informed about how Britain is governed, but I had never heard of the Accession Council. And I suspect most of its members were unaware that they were members of the Accession Council until it was summoned a day or two ago to meet today. So there's a lot of royal flummery, and that is about tradition and continuity and making sure that the spotlight now starts to focus on the future, the new king, as well as remembering the late Queen.
But is that easier said than done for Charles III? Mr. Dhondy, let's go to you. Queen Elizabeth, the late mother, was overwhelmingly popular, very well respected. Charles, on the other hand, has had an up and down relationship with the British public over the years. Camilla, now the Queen Consort, has had an even rockier one. Many talk about the Queen as a link to another era. Monarchies, even constitutional ones, are less popular as a form of government today than they were in the 50s or 60s. Do you think the British monarchy will survive another generation, and how much of that depends on the conduct of Charles III, King Charles III?
If you're asking me, I think that the monarchy is absolutely bound to survive, because Britain is a tribal society in very many ways. Even though it is a great modern democracy, the heartfelt emotions of the public are pretty tribal in their allegiance to a monarch, and the determination that such a monarchy should continue. Even the very slogan, "The Queen is dead, long live the King," means that continuity and that tradition has to continue. And today what we have seen is really a pageant of accession of Charles III. Trumpets, soldiers marching everywhere, gun salutes, and the mourning goes hand in hand with the celebration of the new monarch. The congratulations coming in at the same time as people saying, we are extremely sad that the great lady, and she was in very many senses a great lady, is dead. But it's completely an opening out of ceremony. It's not, in fact, a transfer of power, because the monarchs, as we all know, the monarchy ended with
now ceremonial.
with Charles I's head being chopped off by Oliver Cromwell. And what we see now is ceremony and a passing on of the baton of royalty, not a monarchy. Because, apart from the fact that Charles III can declare declare a public holiday, a bank holiday at his mother's funeral date, there's not much he can do about the cost of living, about the energy, about the war in Ukraine. He can't even voice political opinions. Charles used to be as... Yeah.
I'll come to that in a bit. But let me ask the same question to Andrew Whitehead. That's an important point you raised about, him not supposed to be venturing into politics. But Andrew Whitehead, let me ask you that same question. You have King Charles III. He's inheriting the throne at a time when the monarchy as an institution is still broadly supported in Britain. I think about 60% in favour, as Farrukh Dhondy points out. But this outpouring of support, this admiration for the Queen, can you assume or mistake that to be unwavering support for the royal family per se?
No, but I don't think there's any strength behind the Republican movement in Britain. The Queen was hugely popular. She was much more popular than the institution of the monarchy. I think it's fair to say that Charles is less popular, but people are willing to think good of him. He's clearly a sincere person with a strong sense of public duty. But I think I agree with Farrukh that the monarchy is likely to survive, but it's not certain to survive. For many young people here, it's really seen as a bit of an irrelevance. They don't think very much about it. They don't really wish it ill. They're not campaigning against the monarchy, but neither does it engage them very much. They don't really rate it very highly. And I think one of the problems of Britain's system of governance is it is creaking and out of date. So we have an unelected second chamber in Parliament, the House of Lords. That is completely unjustifiable. The Westminster estate, the Houses of Parliament, are simply not fit for purpose. The first past the post electoral system now seems to be past its sell-by date. We need a new system of devolution of power and authority, not simply to the nations such as Scotland and Wales, but to the English regions as well, to keep the country united, because there's an increasing chasm between particularly London and the area around it and the post-industrial north of England. If all these are addressed, then somebody may say, is it time to look at the monarchy as well? I don't think that's imminent. I don't think it's likely, but it's not impossible.
Well, all of these problems landed on Liz Truss's plate, and she had barely 48 hours to figure out how to, come to terms with the task ahead of her before you saw the demise of Queen Elizabeth II. So I want to now go across to that interesting point that Farrukh Dhondy raised, that over the years, I think, prime ministers would meet the Queen, is it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? I'm not too sure about that, but she has had decades of experience. She's, met world leaders over the past 7 decades, and these are very private audiences, right? But this, is that going to be the same for Truss? What is her relationship likely to be under this new king, Charles III, who has often spoken about political issues and often has gotten into controversy for that? Andrew?
Well, the Prime Minister will continue to have a weekly audience at Buckingham Palace with the monarch, with the new king. And in fact, Liz Truss is meeting the king today for her second audience within the very short time since she took her job and the king took his new post. We have had something we've never had before, a new Prime Minister and a new monarch within a space of 48 hours. It's quite remarkable. I don't often feel sorry for prime ministers, but I do have a tinge of sympathy for Liz Truss. She has a difficult job to do, and before she's settled into it, she has one of the biggest moments of national turmoil and a rupture in the nation to deal with and to help to lead the country through. I think she might find the weekly audiences quite useful. She doesn't have to take any note of what the monarch says. It's simply a conversation. It's a briefing, and it's a very confidential briefing. But the Queen and now the King will probably say, "Well, that makes sense. That's good. Have you thought about that?" And it may just be an opportunity for the Prime Minister to reflect a little bit more on some of the things that's underway. But it is not the monarch giving orders to his Prime Minister. The power rests clearly with the Prime Minister and her government, and not with the King. And that's the way it should be.
Farooq Dhondy, the new King, basically, the Queen was known to bring a sense of stability to the people of England, right? And preserving an institution that she has spent much of her life protecting or trying to protect, that is his biggest challenge right now. But the point is, times have changed. Whether it is this Netflix series on Prince Charles, I think the second season is supposed to be out. It's going to go to delve into all the ugliness of marriages, as marriages are when they fall apart. Whether it's the Harry Meghan chapter, which he addressed in his first speech, saying that he would like some sort of rapprochement on that front. How does all of that affect Charles III? Farooq Dhondy.
Well, there's always been scandal in the royal family. Queen Victoria's children were not free of it. Edward VII was known as a roue of sorts. And yes, this particular branch, this particular generation of royalty have faced a lot of problems. All of them except Edward have faced a divorce. Andrew faces the fact that everybody in the world knows that he was a friend of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and had the convicted Ghislaine Maxwell pimping for him. There are photographs and proof, and he had a disgraceful, defeatful interview on British television, in which he denied all that, but everybody knew he was lying. And then there's, of course, the Harry and Meghan thing, where Meghan takes every opportunity to make some money and accuse the royal family of racism and all sorts of things. And, of course, Prince Philip was terribly indiscreet in the things that he said about other people and other nations. Even so, it's the Queen has represented a sort of stability in the tribal consciousness of Britain. Not that she has had anything to do with any decisions that were made by the successive governments. She's seen, 17 prime ministers, and I don't think that she influenced any of them in any particular way. Now, Prince Charles, when he was King Charles III, when he was Prince of Wales, expressed a lot of opinions, and he holds some opinions on, say, the environment and on global warming and on architecture and so on extremely dearly. He holds them very fast. And he used to write to ministers who ignored his letters. Now that he's the king, he has to stop writing those letters, stop expressing any. That's constitutionally required of him, to be silent on the issues of the day.
Yeah.
But
will he find that easy? Will it be easy to slip into this new role? I think he's mentioned somewhere that this is a note to self he has to keep in mind. Lastly, Andrew Whitehead, just to you then, yes, as you both said, the powers of the British monarchy are now largely symbolic and ceremonial. But what about when it comes to the Commonwealth nations? I think now King Charles III has had a view on it. He said you're free to chart your own course. But isn't the role of the head of the Commonwealth nations is not a hereditary posting, is it? It's more honorary. How does this change even Commonwealth nations choosing to stay on or move out?
Well, I believe the Queen made an appeal to all the nations of the Commonwealth to accept Charles as the new head of the Commonwealth, and I understand that the Commonwealth nations have agreed to do that. So I expect that King Charles will be the head of the Commonwealth. But of course, he's not head of state of very many Commonwealth countries. He's certainly not the head of state of India, for example. He is the head of state of Australia, Canada, Jamaica, quite a number of Caribbean countries, and some of them have suggested that they may be moving away from having a Brit as head of state. Why should they? And moving towards a Republican form of government. And that, to me, makes a great deal of sense. I don't think it will necessarily weaken the Commonwealth, but then the Commonwealth is a fairly innocuous body. It doesn't really do a lot. Its purpose is largely symbolic and as a sort of communion of what you might call the English-speaking world. It's an aftermath of empire, and it tries to make sure that empire has a positive legacy in the modern world, rather than being something which sours relations between states.
Well, thank you both. We're out of time. Of course, we could continue this conversation. It's really, truly fascinating, everything that's going on in the UK right now. But thank you both for joining us on Left, Right and Centre.